Hi, my name is Jonathan Silverman and I run a business called GSA Business Development. This short slideshow is entitled It's About the Customer, and its aim is to help small businesses improve the way that they approach sales, and in particular about focusing on the customer rather than focusing on their business, their services and their product. It's fair to say, I think we'd all understand the term people buy people. And it's also fair to say that people like people who are like themselves. You've heard the expression, birds of a feather flock together. Now, in a business context, that also means that typically buyers like and trust individuals who are predominantly interested in them, their issues, their opportunities, and so on. So it's really important to focus on the customer rather than on focusing the products and services that you want to pitch. How do you come across from the outset? What's the first impression that organizations and individuals have of you and your business? Is it a sales pitch, or is it someone that's interested in them? You definitely won't generate business with people if you focus more on yourself, your products and services, than what worries them, what interests them. And that's not just face to face. That could be on the phone. It could also be in your communications material, and that equally means email, social media, in other words, every interaction with the customer. Let's talk a bit about benefits. Benefits is supposedly what customers buy. You'll have heard that before. Ultimately, customers buy benefits, what it does for them. So ask yourself the question, what's the main benefit that you offer your customers? What is it that they buy from you, and why do they buy? The problem is that most organizations confuse features with benefits. I don't know what you had in mind a moment ago, but often it's generally around something that you do, you offer, and not something that the customer buys. What do I mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is that whether it's face-to-face or on the phone, often sellers talk about what the product or service does or is rather than customer needs. And they talk at the prospects and keep going until they batter the prospect into submission. And the customer's actual needs often are almost irrelevant to what the seller has already decided that they're going to say. And that's the same also in literature and websites. If you look at a lot of websites, it'll talk about what the services are, about us, our services, and very little about the customers. So my point here is that it's more important to understand why the customers buy than what they buy. What's the context for that purchase? Think of it maybe in a car showroom. A dozen people could come into a car showroom to look at a 4x4. All of them could have different motivations for buying. One could be the arrival of a newborn, and therefore they're thinking about upsizing their car, and therefore what might be interesting to them. It could be child safety. It could be all manner of things around family and getting prams in the boot and storage space and so on and so forth. Security. But equally, someone else could come in that's at the end of a 3-year PCP or a hire purchase agreement. Or maybe it's a Porsche Cayenne or something like that, where the person's just had an inheritance and they want to upgrade from the current 4x4 they have to a more sportier version. All of those are contexts for purchase. In other words, the why and not the what. So it doesn't pay to have the same proposition for each of those customers. And remember, prospects don't want to be told. None of us want to be sold to. We want to feel like we have the option to buy and have choice in the matter. So a sales process involves dialogue, conversation, It isn't a pitch, it isn't a presentation, and it isn't a monologue. It's not one way, it should be two way. And ideally, what we're looking for here is somewhere around 50-50. Ideally, the prospect should be speaking more, but 50-50 in terms of split between conversation that you might start or the prospect may start. So ask yourself the question, what you're offering, what does that mean to the customer? You'll have heard the expression before, what's in it for them? So ask yourself the question, or maybe even use the statement, which means what? Which means that? So the level of support we can give means that you'll never be short of stock, and if you've got any problems, you can call us 24/7 and we have a guarantee of service. And that means that you can finish the job, get paid on time, and you can have happy customers, Mr. Prospect. That's what it means to them. So focus on that. This was a presentation I did for a travel client a few months ago. And it's interesting because I looked online at, I typed in, what are the benefits of travel? And I think this is quite interesting because if you look along from the top, it says improves your social skills, reduces your stress, accomplishes your personal goals, and you can see the phoenix there. It makes you more flexible. It teaches you to be more patient. All of those benefits are about the customer, you the person, not, for example, about seeing wonderful sights. That's fantastic, whether you're seeing the pyramids or Victoria Falls or wherever you're going, but that's actually a feature. The benefit is what it gives you as a person. So, remember, people don't buy what you do, they buy what you do for them. This is a different way of looking at it. What problems, what issues, what challenges do your customers have? And I've asked another question at the bottom there. What's more compelling, pain or gain? Often people talk about the fact that opportunity or gain is more compelling. Let me ask you this. If you had an opportunity perhaps to whiten your smile and correct your teeth like this lady on the bottom at the right, and I said to you perhaps that it would improve your personal impact, whether that's in a personal life situation or in a corporate situation, and perhaps you would look better in front of prospects and it would give you more confidence and so on, but I told you that it would cost you somewhere between £3,500 and £4,000, how would you feel? My argument would be that you would probably take at that point a value judgment. You'd say, what could £3,500, £4,000 buy me? How important is that personal impact to me? Could I perhaps go on holiday with that money? Could I do some work in the office? Could I invest in something? Could I do some work at home? Now let's turn to pain. Let's imagine you had a very bad abscess or perhaps a problem with your wisdom teeth, and that was causing you pain. And maybe that pain stopped you from sleeping at night. You couldn't eat properly. You couldn't focus on your daily tasks. And if I said to you, you couldn't have that solved on the NHS, but it would cost you £3,500 to £4,000, what would your thoughts be at that point? Would it be, well, maybe I can spend the money on a holiday? Would it be, maybe I could do some work in the house? I think you'd beg, borrow or steal the money and get rid of the pain because you couldn't function effectively. So in my view, pain is more compelling than gain. And it's very important, therefore, to understand what is bothering your customer. Because generally speaking, one of the contexts for sale, or for purchase rather, is pain. It's issue-based. It's a headache that they want to get rid of. If you can tap into that, you're likely to be more effective. Now let me ask you another question. Same travel client I mentioned earlier. When I asked them about their target audience, they said, well, we've got a number of different targets that we could sell to. The owner on the bottom there, he sometimes is a small business and he buys travel or at least authorises travel. The finance director perhaps in a larger organisation, what's he interested in? He's interested in the numbers, of course, amongst other things. In the middle, you've got the traveller. Now, in some organisations, the traveller books their own travel arrangements. He's interested in making sure he gets the best route, the most comfortable. Perhaps he's got the business lounge, and he doesn't get stranded with an organisation that is perhaps not the most well known. He may play for safety. The PA wants to avoid hassle because she may be the booker in this instance, and therefore it's all on her head, and she's got a million and one other things to deal with. So if you can take the pain of the administration away, you can sell to her. And finally, the travel manager or procurement manager, who may be quite similar to the finance director in that he wants to make sure that the request for proposal or the tender or whatever is orchestrated correctly. He gets pitches perhaps from several different organisations. He manages the costs and ensures the service levels are 100%. So these buyers all respond to different stimuli in terms of the selling process. You may have seen this example before, a hammer and a hole. Let me ask you another question. Would an 18-stone rugby player who's a DIY enthusiast have a need for or want to buy the same hammer as an 8-stone woman that just wants to keep one in the toolbox in her new house? Probably not. They are different needs and different requirements. And you've also heard, I'm sure, are you buying a hammer or are you buying the ability to make a hole? Or perhaps if it's a screwdriver, it's the ability to put the bathroom cabinet up to stop having a whole raft of perfumes and toiletries sitting on the shelf and cluttering up the bathroom. So it's understanding your customer and the customer's need. And the only way you can do that is to ask questions. These are all open questions. The image in the middle, the only one that's missing is which, but you could have who's responsible for buying, which source do you normally use, where do you normally source your supplies, what could your current supplier do to improve things for you, and why do you typically do that, or when do you usually place your orders, and so on. The point is, if you ask questions, one, it will be a better dialogue, it will be a better conversation, and two, you'll get more answers to enable you to tailor your proposition. So a question for you again. How do you want to be perceived? Do you want to be perceived as the vulture on the right, who's only interested in themselves, or the consultant on the left? Imagine you went to see this consultant and you said, I've got a pain in my side. And the first thing he said was, I know what that is. That's your kidney. I think we need to whip your kidney out and put you on dialysis. That would be a pretty grim thing to have. You would not go to that kind of consultant or doctor or surgeon. What you'd hope is he would diagnose by asking questions, and you need to think like that in a sales scenario. So, how excited are your prospects and customers to deal with you based on the way that you come across in a sales scenario? If they're looking a bit or feeling a bit like this, you've got problems. You've got to remember that the customer, the individual, is only interested in what issues they have, what concerns them. It's not about you, it's about them. So, if you've been doing the same thing over and over, if you've been approaching the customer by constantly pitching your products and services at them, and it's not working the way you'd like, take a look in the mirror, think about doing things differently, because that will be the way that you will improve your results. Thanks very much, and I really appreciate you listening. My name's Jonathan Silverman, the company's GSA Business Development, and our details are on screen now if you'd like to contact us. Many thanks again. Bye-bye.